The guys draft an FFPC main event. That is what we're doing today on Stealing Bananas. I'm Ben Gretch. You can find the Stealing Signals newsletter at bengretch.substack.com on my ranks. All sorts of other things. Cool new rankings tool over there. With me, as always, is Shawn Siegele, who is finally getting out all of those articles that he promised over at RotoViz. Shawn, how are you doing?
Good. We have a fun start to this draft here. I'm excited to really work through. Ben, we did a couple of really early main events, and going back through the rosters for those, it's pretty fun. We've got some guys at some great prices, so we'll see, how that ages over the next month. Because certainly we're going to see plenty of moves again. Maybe some of those guys will fall. Maybe some of the other picks on those teams won't look as good. But can we plot out similar or better paths now that there's a little bit more information? And Ben, we are doing this draft basically the last day before
Preseason.
we get some preseason games. And so everything will change again over the next 72-ish hours. But yeah, I think this should be a lot of fun drafting with that information and then seeing how we incorporate that into the subsequent drafts we do.
That's right. So we drew the 103 in this one. We are, for those watching on YouTube, you can see we are already into the early second round. I got in about a minute before the draft got into the draft. Usually you're the one that cuts it close. You texted me about 10 minutes early. You were here, and I was like, well, Shawn, you're going to be waiting because I'm still hanging a curtain rod. Jumped in, quickly made our decision at 103. We land on Brock Bowers. I'm curious your thoughts there because you had mentioned CeeDee Lamb and Jahmyr Gibbs as other options. I didn't really leave us a lot of talk. I filibustered us right into Bowers, which was the pick that I wanted to make. So brilliant move on my part. We do get our first share of Bowers in the main event because for people who are listening, when we did our two early mains, we got late draft slots, did not get access to Bowers there. He is going a little later than the 3. So, if you wanted to build a different type of team, maybe this would have been the spot to do it. At the same time, I mean, he's probably the true 101 if ADP was fair. I mean, I guess maybe that's a hot take a little bit, but we're barreling back down to our second round pick.
I have him ranked number 1 overall.
Okay.
And so
there you go.
The reason that I was mentioning both Lamb and Gibbs, I think both of those players have absurd upside as well. Not surprisingly, that's why they're going in the top 5 picks. It's possible that we'll have more shots at Bowers than we would have at the 2 of them. And, we're hoping to do a decent number of these after having a good main event season last year and getting some money in the coffers. But we never know for sure what, chances we will get to draft players. And if we're at the 103, we both have Brock Bowers as basically the 101 in the format. You're risking a little bit if you're like, well, we'll just save him for other drafts.
That's right. We were talking through it. You never know what spots you're going to get. You might have the 104 in a draft where he goes 103 or 101. He's going to go 101 in some of these, probably has in several of them. I haven't looked at ADP a ton. But you get the opportunity to take him at 103. You feel he's a true 101. You take him in that spot and then build from there. Figure the rest out, as they say. We are one pick away. Top guys on by ADP, by, I don't know, my lists. Lad McConkey is in that area. I know you're not super high on him. We just got Keenan Allen signing there. George Kittle is in this range. One of the reasons maybe not to go Bowers would have been that you could play Kittle at the 2-3 turn. You have Bucky Irving and Jonathan Taylor, Omarion Hampton, some of the running backs. You can go with elite quarterbacks, I guess, really early. What are you thinking in this range? As Lad
McConkey does go there. And in some ways that makes it a little bit easier. We know we're looking at running backs, or I think really early on, we can look at Lamar Jackson. He's possibly the 3rd round pick for us. There have been glowing reports about Bucky Irving. You've mentioned that he has the perfect fantasy profile. I think that is correct. I think that Jonathan Taylor actually works in different ways with the two potential QBs, but he has immense upside. And then Hampton is someone where the Chargers actually aren't that great for fantasy purposes, but he's so good and he's probably going to have such a big workload that I am completely open to any of those three guys.
I am too. It's really tricky. Hampton looks like the one that would be most likely to swing back around. And a lot of the drafts I did over the weekend, it seemed like he was coming back into the third. I'm very comfortable with either Bucky or Taylor or Hampton for that regard. So we go with Bucky. We were running down a little bit low there. This is a tricky part of drafts. I mean, there's good players, but getting it right feels pretty meaningful because there's a decent amount of risk for a late second round pick relative to the early second round. I mean, that goes back to part of why I love taking Bowers there, because what can we get at the early first round to compete with those players in the back end that get to go Achane, Amon-Ra, Genty, Brian Thomas, Saquon, Nico Collins out of the 9. Saquon fell all the way to 9. Nico comes back around. Neighbors, London. I mean, that's two guys that could, be the top 2 guys in the league in targets this year, as we've talked through. Those are some really nice 1-2 punches. You don't get the 2 of your 1-2 punch from back here. You've been getting me a little more excited about Chase Brown. He went 207, didn't have access to him here. We do go Bucky.
I mentioned
I really like
I mentioned those early mains. We have one that's like a Chase Brown 310. That's pretty exciting. And that team has some other, pretty feisty values as well.
That's incredibly exciting. But yeah, Bowers is that on the 1-2 punch. He's the one that could be. I mean, I know there's a lot of people that are questioning the elite tight end stuff. We talked about Bowers. It feels like a lot. Maybe we haven't dug into it enough. I don't know. I mean, broadly, the elite tight end trends just don't really matter to me. What matters is Brock Bowers' profile. The elite tight end trends are such a small sample in the history of fantasy football. Lamar does go here on the turn. We are 1 pick away. Both Jonathan Taylor and Omarion Hampton still on the board. Kyren Williams, Josh Jacobs, Lamar Jackson. And this drafter has now taken Bijan Kyren. It seems plausible that your guy, Jonathan Taylor, might actually slide 1 more pick unless they start with 3 straight running backs. Kind of thinking they might go with like a Tyreek Hill or a George Kittle here. But yeah, Bowers, if he does have the type of year 2 growth that I think a lot of people that are fading him don't expect or aren't considering because of, Kyle Pitts year 2, not great. Sam Laporta's year 2, not great. At this point in time, the rookie tight end hits that we've seen, which was so few until Pitts and Laporta and Bowers came along, none of them have backed it up with a good second year. So it's easy to be like, well, it can't happen almost. There's not actually a real reason why Bowers can't be meaningfully better. Marvin Harrison goes 302. So they do go wide receiver, not the one I guessed. Makes sense, though. It leaves both Taylor and Omarion Hampton there. If you want to do the rookie thing, if you're really feeling Omarion Hampton in this room, I'm all for it. I'm also like, I know you're really into the Taylor profile. I'm always of 2 minds with Jonathan Taylor. I totally see the talent profile, really like him. Also see how some people are out on him because of some of the situational and team-based stuff. So I'm like, I want to play him and I don't want to play him. Could be this year's Saquon. He could not get enough receiving and some of those issues. And so it becomes kind of a problem. Daniel Jones throws to the backs a good amount, though. I do think if he plays some this year, right now it looks like Richardson's going to be the guy, but Taylor closed the season very, very well. You go either way. We go with your guy, Taylor. It is a really nice price on Taylor. I mean, I think Bowers...
303 for Jonathan Taylor, that's pretty absurd.
That's pretty absurd. Bowers, Bucky, Taylor. I had him a tier break ahead of Omarion Hampton still. You mentioned you had taken a peek at my rankings a bit, so you were certainly aware that... that
was one of the things
I'm riding with you on Taylor.
I mean, you have Hampton as a target in that next tier down and not necessarily Taylor as a target. But that's one of the situations here where, in situations where you actually get that guy to fall through. And it's interesting to me.
That's right.
That, Taylor in the last handful of days, it's not a huge number of main event drafts, but I'm actually looking specifically at our main event ADP through the ADP tool on the site because, unfortunately, main events are a little tighter than the big gorilla. And so if you're playing in a main event, it does behoove you to at least glance at that and see where some guys that you're seeing an overall ADP falling to you might not. Regardless, when you're looking at Jonathan Taylor there, and I think that the second round is actually pretty good, right? I mean, Derrick Henry, Chase Brown, those guys are good names, especially like both of them say if they were in round 3. Bucky Irving was, very easily our favorite player from last year, and they're basically talking about him as being Barry Sanders, which he doesn't have quite that much speed, but Barry wasn't that fast either. What he was obscene side to side, and being able to then go forward again without losing speed. You're not going to necessarily rip off a ton of 70-yard touchdown runs, but man, Bucky Irving in that offense with that receiving profile, to be able to get him with Taylor, I think sets us up with such a fun team. Probably a little bit of a unique team, even though, again, we're going to have some other drafts that do have this. But I think that when you take Bowers in the first round, you are kind of conceding that you may end up pretty running back heavy. And Ben, this is going to be our second of 3 main events where probably, no guarantees, but probably we're looking at running backs, maybe even in the flexes. And that's a very viable way to play it if you have certain guys fall to you in 2025. And, I say that maybe we'll just keep drafting running backs. Tedderell McMillan goes at the 310, does not come back to us at
Nowhere close. He is
right.
rocketing up boards right now.
So
Tyreek Hill, Garrett Wilson, JSN went ahead of him. Omarion Hampton did go at 308. Josh Allen and Kittle, the others that have gone off in this round, but McMillan comes off before even Devontae Adams, before T. Higgins. Higgins starting to slide or fall. Yeah, I mean, he's a really strong pick. I in a league today sat Shawn and was near the turn, had to kind of pick between Worthy and McMillan. I ended up going Worthy. It took me a while. And then I was the pick before the turn, and McMillan did go. It's a potential $10,000 charity league, Shawn, called the Stacked League that they're running. The guys over at the Fantasy Football subreddit have put together. It's a pretty cool league. You got an opportunity to play in it, play for some charity. At the what would it have been? 411 is when I was making that decision. A lot later than where we see McMillan go here. But I went Worthy over
his
McMillan.
ADP in these, in the last couple of days still is the 412. I mean, the 4-5 turn in this type of format is where we would expect him to go. This is a full round early, but it's still obviously not a bad pick.
No, not at all. I was just saying he did end up going at the turn in that other one, and I was pretty bummed. But after him, we see Higgins, we see Breece Hall, Kenneth Walker, Devontae Adams, Jaden Daniels. Walker up at the 401 continues kind of his climb. Are you seeing Worthy at the 4-5 turn as well? Still?
He's been in the middle of 4.
Yeah.
4. Walker is now into 3. So, it probably wasn't us, but he did finally make that move. And he made it just in time to miss some practices with foot soreness, which, man, Kenneth Walker does not want you to enjoy the Kenneth Walker experience. That's for sure.
Yeah, that caused me to move him back down a tier and say, you know what? I have him ranked very aggressively. I'm going to still have him ranked aggressively, but a little less aggressively. Kamara goes after Worthy. So some of our picks here, Shawn, did go off. One of the things in our pre-draft discussion, you sent me over a few notes. We were looking at this turn as a potential, or maybe the next turn I guess it was the next turn was a potential, QB tight end range. This turn, I think, as well, possibly. But you'd like to get the receivers, and you're picking all the way back at this end. You really are at liberty of, who's going to fall back to you.
So one of the interesting things to work through with CeeDee Lamb is that you potentially get more value, especially with that early game, if you just have Pickens. I mean, CeeDee Lamb's already going so early that a massive game on Thursday night. Yeah, very possibly does move him to the 101. But with Pickens, a huge game is going to move him like into the third round, maybe even to the 2-3 turn for those drafts that happen after that. And those drafts that happen after are pretty interesting and I think pretty important. Well, we have Pickens in this range. We have Jameson Williams in this range. Those were two guys that I was certainly looking at possibly moving up just slightly after we go running back, and not take Lamb early. If we'd taken Lamb early, I think either Travion Henderson or RJ Harvey would not only be interesting, but they would almost be required with one of these two picks. Now I think it's much more viable. And when we're looking at the need to start building out some receiver depth, we might be looking at Pickens and Jameson Williams as the preferable picks here. The other interesting name, kind of as you mentioned, I may be not as high on him, but as we've built our plan for this season, we've certainly mentioned our willingness to kind of spread our QB picks across the elite QBs. We are one pick away and Jalen Hurts hasn't gone. I probably would still pass on him, but he is compelling here.
Yeah. I think because we haven't taken a receiver, I think it's tough to take Hurts, but I agree with you. It is compelling. I think he would. So he does make it. Lamar went 301. And so there's a possibility he comes back around to 503. And probably I would rather really get a value on Hurts, right? And so then the question is, I love your notes about Travion and RJ Harvey. Do we want to go with a third running back? Would be one direction I could see going and then come back with a receiver. Or, I mean, Shawn, you kind of started with George Pickens. Like that's, I mean, I'm very in on that play this year. That's probably where I would lean so we can get that first receiver. But what are you thinking? Do you want to get a little weird and take Travion Henderson in?
I think one of those two guys will come back. I think we're risking. It's a decent chance the Pickens won't. My biggest problem with him is just that he's such a piece of work, and I think that does create some fantasy risk. But let's do him here. He's a really fun pick as your potential first wide receiver. There's a chance that the gap between Lamb and Pickens is not that large, simply because again, Pickens is such a massive playmaker. If defenses force the Cowboys to play through Pickens, I mean, CeeDee Lamb can do a lot more, right? And he's much more dynamic with the ball in his hands. But there is a difference in price here. And both of those guys, I mean, this is the team, even I think much more straightforwardly, even than Rice and Worthy, where if you had a season where CeeDee Lamb and George Pickens do what Chase and Higgins did last year, in some ways, it seems more likely to me that Lamb and Pickens would be
mostly because they don't have Chase Brown. They don't have a running back, right? I mean, maybe Jada Blue can do some things, but that team's going to throw. They're not going to run the ball.
Throw a ton. Sanders. I mean, their defense is probably going to be tragic again. Yes, I mean, they're set up to throw a ton of passes and probably to be pretty efficient. Pickens is going to be one of those guys who's infuriating, and certainly infuriating to Steelers fans, because he's just going to be electric. Even as it's funny when you go and read a little about the Steelers and their wide receivers are bragging about the fact that they're going to actually block this year. And you're like, yes, that's good reality football integrity. George Pickens is going to score a lot of points.
That's why I think I'm nervous about Lamb at as high as 103. Is everything you just said. I do think Pickens is meaningfully threatening. Not entirely to Lamb, as you talked about. There's a skill gap there, but it is an intriguing element to all of this. Henderson does go at the turn. Jameson Henderson is a fun little turn there for a drafter who took Josh Jacobs at the 2-3 turn. So
otherwise has a really exciting team.
Yeah. We are going to be back on the clock here in a little bit of a trickier spot at receiver now that Jameson goes, I think. Arguably RJ Harvey territory. Arguably that Jalen Hurts decision would be one that we would want to talk about if he doesn't go here to the drafter that did not take Lamar on the inside of us at the turn. Some potential that he does take a quarterback. Is there a receiver that you would be in on here?
I don't think so. I mean, my next guys are definitely Devontae Smith and Zay Flowers. That jumps some other players who are still available, but I just don't think that Terry McLaurin or DJ Moore are draftable at these prices. Jalen Hurts does go. In some ways, that's a little bit of a relief not having to
Yeah.
decide on that. In part because I think that we may be looking at Patrick Mahomes a little bit later, even though obviously we don't have either of the two Chiefs receivers there. I guess this feels like RJ Harvey, even if it starts getting us very running back heavy.
Yeah, it's either that or getting very tight end heavy for me and going with Sam Laporta along with Bowers. But I don't know why we wouldn't just take RJ Harvey.
So RJ Harvey is a lot of fun. We talk so much about winning the race to fill the flex. That's been the RotoViz mantra for years and years. And obviously you have discussed the RB dead zone and worked through how that functions. And your main point there is that the young superstar potential backs don't fit into that. Harvey, a guy where he's actually falling at this point. We take him meaningfully above where he's gone in the last handful of drafts. That doesn't make any sense to me. Obviously, they do the shenanigans with listing him really low on the initial depth chart. That doesn't mean anything. This is a guy who he's a better prospect than Alvin Kamara. Now, Kamara has done so much at the NFL level that kind of statement is somewhat meaningless, but Harvey's upside is better than anybody who has gone since we took Jonathan Taylor. And I would include Kenneth Walker in that.
People keep talking about Evan Ingram as the Joker. We've talked about it on the show a little. I've shared why I don't really believe that the idea that Evan Ingram is a Joker even holds water, because after he was signed, it was a situation where Sean Payton was asked if he was the Joker, and then he commented on it, and he basically said the things that you say about a player you just signed, which was say positive things about him. Said something about, I think he has those qualities and some of these like vague things, and people have been attaching this Joker label to Evan Ingram ever since. And it really, again, he was asked because they have been talking about their search for the Joker this offseason. I'm not sure if he's been asked repeatedly about RJ Harvey being the Joker, but RJ Harvey went early in the NFL draft in the second round. I think I've shared that another quote he had this offseason was that it would be hard for them to find the Joker even at 20th overall, and they think the Joker is a superstar player. But RJ Harvey as sort of the Darren Sproles to J.K. Dobbins playing kind of that Pierre Thomas role for the 2011, 2012 Saints, that range, I think are the years. That's what this feels like in this backfield. Harvey's probably, there's a lot about Harvey not being a good pass blocker that people are concerned about. He's probably going, not necessarily going to be in it on third and longs and those types of things, but he's going to be running routes where he's likely to be targeted and given the ball in space a lot in the PPR league. It's going to be very favorable. And then he's running, getting carries and all of, that element of it behind a really good offensive line. It just feels like a really good fit, a very high upside fit. I like J.K. Dobbins this year too, but Harvey's the one that could be really exciting.
You just look through the different reports from camp. And there are even reports talking about how J.K. Dobbins is clearly the leader of this group. One of the reasons why we were taking J.K. Dobbins on every team early is that J.K. Dobbins is good. He's not good in the same way that rookie RJ Harvey can potentially be. And one of the things about this build as well with the 3 early running backs is that if we got into a situation where we absolutely couldn't play Harvey, you're probably going to play him in week 1, depending on how this draft, fully plays out. But say you can't play in week 2 or week 3, you're going to be able to play him for the $1 million in weeks 15, 16, and 17. And then we're going to build a deep overall room here The other thing that's important to understand is that J.K. Dobbins can have a good season, and R.J. Harvey can still pay off this draft price.
That's right. I mean, this backfield could wind up having a really large number of combined running back points. After Harvey, James Conner, Terry McLaurin, Sam Laporta goes to the Kittle drafter, goes with the 2 tight ends. The idea that I briefly floated out there of kind of being the bully tight end guy. It's nice in a room like this where you see 2 guys go tight end that we have Bowers locked up, or you go see somebody go 2 tight ends. Burrow, Devonta Smith, Cortland Sutton, Chuba Hubbard, DJ Moore is sort of the rest of the 5th round. DeAndre Swift closes the 5th. Shawn, I think the next receiver for me at this point would be Travis Hunter. We got a quote on the Rich Eisen show the other day that Hunter, he was asked how often they'd play. He kind of just threw out a number, but that number was 80% of the offensive snaps. That was the sort of target for, week 1 for the early part of this season. It's not a hard and fast thing. It was a sort of a hypothetical estimate, but to hear him put a number on it that was that high for where they would want him to start, to me, was a pretty bullish sign in terms of what the entirety of, his usage for the season could be, what the ceiling could be. Where are you with Travis Hunter right now?
Yeah, I think he's the next receiver for me as well. I guess I would be nervous about what the usage is going to be. And yet, when you think about how that upside is going to work, you think about the players that he's competing with here. I say Zay Flowers is actually still on the board and did last past Travis Hunter, who just did go. So I think that part is pretty interesting. It would have been interesting to take TJ Hawkinson if he had fallen through. He goes there. At the 604 as the tight end 5. We get Njoku in the middle of 6. Ben, I was kind of mentioning to you in our planning as well. He's someone that you've been really pushing, and I think that that's the right play. I think that getting him in round 6 or round 7 here would have been an interesting way to play it as well. In between them, Flowers does come off. So we're starting to lose a lot of the top possibilities. Unfortunately, it does look like some of the gross names are going to be the people who come into play here. One of the issues that you have with an early pick, and certainly you can't complain about having an early pick. It's absolutely fantastic to be able to go out there and get someone like a Brock Bowers. But the 6-7 turn is also bad. It's not just that at 2, you're getting someone off of a pretty meaningful tier break. And it's especially bad potentially in main events where someone like a Jerry Jeudy is going before we get up, and he does go there. So he is now also gone. It's not a particularly loaded area right here. Lots of names that we like. We really like a lot of picks a couple rounds later where you'd love to have 3 or 4 picks per round. So then the next question is, who would you pull up and draft way early because you do like a lot of guys later versus thinking, okay, it's a soft area, but ADP does still give us some indication.
I mean, I think I would want to be pulling somebody up here. It's hard because a guy that we talked about before in Jordan Addison is now suspended and, may fall all the way back to the end of the 8th. He's been going in the early part of the 8th. Maybe that suspension pushes him down a little. I don't know that I really want to play that. There's usually a couple sharp drafters in every room these days. And the guy who took Flowers there has Neighbors, London, Omarion Hampton, Xavier Worthy, Devonta Smith, Zay Flowers. 5 receiver build early on. The 1 running back is Omarion Hampton, the 3rd. And you get drafters out there that are, this isn't 2020 or 2015 anymore, Shawn. There's multiple drafters in every FFPC room that I think know what they're doing in terms of or at least that I would say know what they're doing, right? That follow sort of the RotoViz protocol, if you will, or are listening to these types of podcasts or whatever, are doing it on their own. But I guess I don't have a concern about pulling guys forward was sort of the point. The best receiver on my board is Olave. I know you're not super into the play. I would be very comfortable just taking Addison at this point and then taking Mahomes on the way back. Both the drafters on the turn have the QBs, Jackson and Hurts. And so you don't really probably need to take Mahomes here.
Well, I have a lot of concerns about Olave, but you do still have him ranked ahead of Addison. He is very clearly the ADP play. I think that in a draft where we don't have other great choices, that this will be one where, I mean, I don't think we want to come out of our mains together without any Olave. I would be leaning Olave here unless you are strongly on a different guy.
Let's do it. No, I think this is a good spot to take him as well. I mean, I know this may not be the way to think about it. I think sometimes we've talked about this over the years. Sometimes when you don't take a lot of receivers early, you've expressed to me before that sometimes you want to take even bigger swings because then if you hit it, then you have this supercharged offense. I do like to think about it in these terms, on a team like this on the terms of, hey, the positive element for me with Olave is this guy's going to run a ton of routes. He's going to have a really high targets per route because there's no one else in this offense that I have a lot of trust or faith to be able to earn volume. I do think Kellen Moore is going to be a favorable head coach for fantasy from the perspective that I think he's going to want to play with tempo, even though they're going to be bad. I think he's going to try to do certain types of things that are a little bit more forward thinking, a little bit more fantasy friendly. I don't know that he's going to be, able to overcome the quarterback situation. The fact that Spencer Rattler looks like the best QB in camp is not good. You wanted Tyler Shuck to be better than his profile suggested he was. Like, there's uncertainty there at least. Spencer Rattler was bad last year. And so the Olave stuff in terms of the efficiency and all of that and what his true ceiling could be, it's concerning. It's concerning. But the 6'7" turn, Shawn, this is a guy who's probably around 3 talent. The concussions held him down early in the offseason. The offensive situation, I think, holds him down. He's been over 2 yards per out run every year of his career. Smaller sample last year, but was again over 2. And he's done it in different ways. The ADOT came down a little bit last year. He's been a pretty darn efficient player. There's elements of that efficiency that aren't great. You've talked about the ball in hand. Some of that stuff's not great. I think he's a good route runner. He gets open. He catches the ball when it's thrown to him. He's not nothing. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
You're like, I wish we didn't take him.
Is it bad that having Spencer Rattler as the potential quarterback gives me a little bit of a sigh of relief because the whole Tyler Shook show just seemed like you could go out there and score negative points in a game. All your receivers would finish with negative yardage. Spencer Rattler is at least someone who is a real football player.
If you throw enough pick sixes, do they take points away?
So, yeah, I mean, Chris Olave, considering the range, the other receivers who are gone, I mean, Stephon Diggs and Ricky Pearsall are the next 2 receivers who go. I strongly prefer Chris Olave to those guys, which certainly doesn't mean that he will score more points. Ben, I guess, given where we are at receiver, I think Mahomes would probably be too much of a luxury pick, and I'm hoping that we have a shot to take him at some point with Xavier Worthy. So for me, this is probably going ahead and getting Addison, although the suspension in some ways doesn't fit as well with this, but in some ways it fits better, right? If you think you can get through those first 3 weeks, the other 2 names I would have would just be to select a Green Bay receiver early, a preference in those 3 guys.
I think Addison is a pick. I mean, I'd be open to either Green Bay receiver, but let's give them, they have a little bit of lower ADPs. Let's give them the chance to come back. Maybe Addison's the one that would be more likely to fall. I think we both like Addison quite a bit more. Yeah, I'm okay playing Matthew Golden at this point. The Jaden Reed practice reports that he's just not even, I mean, they had the family night or whatever the other night, and he didn't even get a single route in 2 wide receiver sets, which I mean, I guess that surprises me a little bit. I mean, I understand that that's what it was the first 2 years, but it surprises me that they didn't even mix it up a little bit in the preseason. Just see what they have
Don't
with
you feel like they're possibly also trolling people a little bit with that, though?
maybe.
And they make it absolutely 0. It One of the things that we know for sure is that you shouldn't overly benchmark yourself to what's happening in some of these early scrimmages, although,
Oh, for
again,
sure.
with veterans, I mean, you'd like to see that involvement. Then, given the receivers who have gone, I do think that Jaden Reed playing only in 3 wide receiver sets would be a good pick right there.
Yeah. Yes.
Having
That's
said
the
that,
thing. That's the part about his price that is weird, is that he's still, as efficient as he is, he's still very viable. Shawn, he strikes me as a small win, big win. We talk about the small miss, big hit, or the, small hit, big miss. I mean, he strikes me as a small hit, big hit. Like, even if he doesn't play,
so Ben,
he's
what you're
too.
telling me is that if he goes out and injures himself in the first game and his quarterback injures himself in the first game, and then they go through the season and they don't throw any passes, and Jaden Reed also has one of the highest drop rates in the NFL, that at the end of the year, he's going to still score 200 points and be a good pick. Is that kind of what you're thinking there? Because that's what we got last year.
That's literally what just happened. And people are like, he's not good. Like, I don't know. I don't know how the circumstances could be any worse. And like you said, he still scored 200 points. I mean, I know that down the stretch in the second half, the scoring wasn't there, but that's just, we know splits data doesn't do anything for you. That's just ignoring the data that's right in front of you in terms of the full season numbers and the stuff that was there earlier in the year and how efficient he was as a rookie. And I mean, one of the other things, is like targets per route went down a little bit, but they gave him like double the rush attempts. His manufactured touches went through the roof last year. I don't understand, the comment that he wore down a little bit that came out this offseason. But as you said that's what I thought about when I saw they didn't play him in a single 2 wide receiver set. I was like, they're like, because he only ran like 10 routes total. And I'm just like, they're practicing other guys. They know what they have in Jaden Reed. Like, they're just not even, they'll put him out there in the 3 receiver sets because he's going to play in those sets. They're not even pushing him in any kind of a way. I do wonder if his size and his stature is a little bit of an issue here, but I mean, he didn't even run 400 routes last year. I don't understand the whole thing about him not, like they were talking about him sort of maybe wearing down a little bit last year. It's just a bizarre note there. So anyway, he's still on the board. Matthew Golden goes in this round. Hopefully he comes all the way back around to us. Shawn, one of the guys I wanted to ask you about, Emeka Buka, been getting nothing but very positive reports. He winds up going 2 picks before the Olave pick in the 6th round. His ADP still in like the 8th, correct?
So, just in these drafts in the last few days, he's been like 709, which
Okay.
again, I've filtered it to be a pretty limited number of drafts, but I do think that given the engagement of the drafters and just the importance of timing to understand how things are moving, that's probably like the clearest picture of where he is now, and he's going to keep rising.
Gotcha.
And the thing that
Tucker
is
Craft.
important to understand is that he could be the best receiver on their team this year without being a superstar, and he could be the highest scoring receiver on their team this year without being a huge win. I'm not saying that those things are likely, but it's important to understand where an injured Chris Godwin is. It's important to understand where a fading Mike Evans is, and it's important to consider how spread the offense could be. I think it's possible he just actually puts those guys completely away. I do want to point out that this is kind of part of my skepticism with them the whole way, which definitely looks incorrect at this point. But that's the way that they looked at him at Ohio State as well, as basically a star. And you listen to the Ohio State folks talking about him, and then you go look at what he actually did there, and it's less impressive. I'm not saying that that's going to necessarily be what happens at the NFL level, but I still think we should be considering what he was as a prospect. And it'll be interesting as we go through here. There are no guarantees and it is getting much trickier to actually get Luther Burden, but it would be disappointing to come out of this draft without Luther Burden, who in many ways is probably a rich man's version of Abuka at still what is a much more palatable price.
Jaden Reed goes. Tucker Kraft goes right behind him. Colson Loveland had gone a pick prior. Jake Ferguson the pick after. I was going to float the second tight end with Tucker Kraft if he made it back. We do see Reed go off. We're into the tier that I have Burden in. Shawn, we've talked about Burden, feel really good about Burden. What is his ADP in these last few weeks?
So just over the last days, he's back up to the 10-10. So that would suggest that there's a chance he could make it to us in round 10. It's tough because if you take him at the 903, then you're giving away basically all of that potential value from his slide. If you pass on him, you've got a pretty decent chance of not getting him. I don't know that we have a lot of other names that we necessarily need to get, but one of the guys that I think it would make sense to draft at that 903 spot, another player who probably won't come back, is Jaden Blue. And so I think Blue with one of these picks would probably make sense. He is at the 1005. Dylan Sampson is the 1006. Burden the 1010. I mean, it's frustrating to think that we're not going to be able to get one of those guys at 10 and one at 11, but we probably won't.
And you want to consider Mahomes still at this range, right? Or just because he's not stacked?
No, I think we can definitely still consider him. It's an interesting kind of development here that if we don't really have anybody we like at 8, we could go with him at 8 and then Blue at the 903 and risk it. Of course, we could certainly just go ahead and grab either Jaden Higgins or Luther Burden here as well.
Yeah, Higgins is the other one I was going to ask you about because he's still there. We do have elite QB drafters on the turn, both of them, Lamar Jackson and Jalen Hurts. So if we want to go Mahomes, I think I would prefer that we just push it around the turn. I don't see how they would take Mahomes at the 8-9, but maybe. I don't know. It does seem like the other guy, like Josh Downs, is the other guy I have ranked as a target in this range. But with Anthony Richardson, looking like the front runner right now, I'm not super into him. And Mahomes goes before us. So there takes that decision actually away from us. One pick ahead of us, the Kelsey drafter grabbed him. I almost said and Tyreek drafter. It's been a few years since the Tyreek Mahomes thing has been a stack. So we are up there. I mean, there's some running backs as well. You mentioned she's going to get in Jaden Blue. That would be ahead of, a Jordan Mason. That would be ahead of a J.K. Dobbins, a Jalen Warren. I love the aggressiveness. I mean, I don't know that did we get Blue already on one of our teams?
We did. Yeah, he really fell in one of our drafts, which was perfect.
Yeah, so we have him once already, but I mean, I don't mind taking him this early as well. But this seems like one of the rookie receivers, correct?
Yeah, the receivers have been pulled up so much in this draft. And
I think probably Higgins.
Yeah, the more expensive guy there. It sounds
like Burden over Higgins, it sounds like to me right now.
Well, he's just such a wild card. We could get anything from him having 120 yards in the first game to only playing like 5 snaps. I think he's a real threat to lead that team in receiving. They act like he's just night and day different than DJ Moore and Roma Dunze. And I mean, that may be a bit of an exaggeration, but every time that he practices, they're like, this guy's just something. Yeah. And then every time he doesn't practice, they're like, man, Luther Burden is such a headache.
Yeah. He's missing everything. We need him back out here on the field.
As fantasy drafters, we can just take all the head case players onto this team because we don't have to personally coach them.
So we take Higgins. The debate now is going to be, do we pull up Jaden Blue or do we pull up Luther Burden? Blue, we had one, random Joe Schmo saying he was an attitude issue, and everybody since then has been rushing to defend him. Apparently, Shawn, when you're practicing alongside Javonte Williams and Miles Sanders, you look like the most explosive player in the backfield. Who knew? But that is the report out of camp, that he looks like the most explosive player in the backfield. Not really a confusing element for us. We don't. I just realized we have Harvey. We don't, want to go Dobbins in any kind of a meaningful way. To me, this pick is Burdner or Blue. I mean, Dylan Sampson certainly would be in range as well. But I mean, who you're looking at the ADP? Who do you think we can potentially get to fall back to us?
Well, I don't think he's going to come back, but Burton has an ADP that could. And so, I mean, Jaden Blue, he's just going to absolutely crush this season. Want to get the players here, regardless of position, who give us that extreme upside. He's such a good receiver. One of the things, Ben, that I like about where we're going with this team, receptions are so hard to come by for receivers in
For
2025.
Yeah.
For running backs, right. The big piece that I did finally release, I appreciate you mentioning those coming out. I've been getting a pretty good tempo for articles coming out. Any RotoViz subs out there or potential subs. Lots of fun pieces, including one today on a player who didn't quite come back to us in round 6. The RB1 scoring, the way in which receptions have completely dried up, is something that you have to contend with as a drafter. It's also something where I do think you can approximate some of the scoring, and you can draft players at great prices who are going to be able, especially in sections of the season. And really that's how you sort of want to think of this, is how am I going to put together individual weekly lineups that let me advance to the semis, that let me win my league, that put me in position to win this entire tournament. Bucky Irving was obviously a big part of that last year. Jaden Blue is likely to be a big part of it this season. And if he can rip off some of those Achane runs, then that's, just additional gravy on top.
Are you not still concerned
massive
about
U-turn that we got with the rhetoric around him? I think is pretty indicative of where this whole thing is going. I mean, they just don't have other choices.
What was that? You said the last U-turn?
The big U-turn with the rhetoric.
Yeah.
And how everyone not only jumped to defend him, but then the reports out of camp have been that he is, I mean, again, like some of the other guys we've talked about for our team or potentially for our team, just something different. And you can't, I mean, most of the players being drafted, even some of the players being drafted early, don't have that. Blue has some red flags, but legitimate 4.2 speed, that doesn't grow on trees. If the guy's going to be involved and is a good receiver who has that, you can score a lot of points without even getting that many touches. One of the things with him, and as it kind of compares to a personal favorite of mine, Tyjae Spears, I think Spears is probably a much better overall running back. I think he's a better pure runner. He might be a more skilled receiver. But Blue has, first of all, he doesn't have some of the injury concerns that Spears has, but also he just has an easier path. And the easier path does matter. His explosiveness is just going to be fun. I think you've got to keep drafting him. And if you end up needing to put together lineups that he doesn't feature in for a while, then you do that. But you want exposure to those types of players.
Can I ask you, we talked about him more closer to the draft, and I think maybe even pre-draft, as you were telling me a little bit about his profile, where you're at on the rushing side of stuff, because especially I think post-draft, when we talked about him, when we did those early mains, you got me a little bit concerned about how that could manifest in sort of pointing out to me in his profile that he never really did have the big work. I remember we were talking, I remember parsing the game logs a little bit and talking about there were some games where he had, larger carry numbers, and then other games where it's kind of completely forgotten about and why that was. We know that the receiving profile is really, really good. The athletic profile is really good. The situation was immediately very positive, and he's so much more explosive than those other guys. But are you feeling like he could actually potentially do something at the NFL level that he didn't necessarily do in college? Because that was something you had said to me a couple of times, that he probably can't take all the work that's there for him. But I guess my thought is like, why not? If they gave it to Rico Dowdle and all that, like basically since the draft, I was like, Shawn, that they were giving it to nobodies last year. Like they'll give the work to anybody.
Well, one of the things that they've said is that running backs are going to be more involved in the passing game. And so that's the first thing that like his fit with what they want to do is perfect. The rushing is weird. Texas didn't necessarily trust him. It's one of those things where you almost wonder if some of this work ethic stuff is
From
and
Texas.
yeah, from Texas. I mean, I don't want to put, too much on that either, but you have a fumbling issue, you have a size issue. It was really strange because his yards before contact numbers were terrible. And you're like, how does a tiny fast guy have really poor yards before contact? Because the after contact numbers were good. And part of that is that if you do break a tackle when you have 4.2 speed, then you can go, right? So I don't know if there are extreme vision issues. If there were, I mean, you get the sense that there had to be a little bit of friction with the coaching staff. Yeah, I don't think that we need to even worry that much about the rushing workload. I think enough rushing and probably as much rushing as he can legitimately handle will sort of happen by itself. But there is this extreme upside scenario where he does just go out there and score like Achan. And certainly if you get that, then it's going to be a big, big win.
That's a really interesting. As you said that, I mean, I'm not gonna go too far into the Texas thing, but I wasn't the biggest fan of Steve Sarkisian when he was at UW, and he's now the Texas coach. Some of what you just implied, I'll just say, wouldn't surprise me based on some of the stories back to the UW years. We are almost back up here. Bayshall Tootin just went. A few quarterbacks have gone. Kyler Murray, Baker Mayfield, Bo Nix, Kincaid, Pitts. There hasn't been a receiver in the last 8 picks. There goes Darnell Mooney as I say that. I don't want to get too excited, but our guy is still there. Brandon Ayuk is still there, who you put in the queue. I just threw Michael Pittman into the queue as well. At this point, I think with only 4 receivers, kind of an interesting pick. Right after we took Blue, I had a pang of regret that you sometimes get because I look back and I was like, man, yeah, we did take Bucky and Taylor and RJ Harvey in the first 5 picks. Probably if we were on the fence, we should have leaned to getting both Higgins and Burden and getting that 5th receiver, George Pickens, Olave, Addison as our first 3 receivers. They're all great. They're not necessarily the kinds of guys that, make you 100% certain that if these rookies really, really hit, if Burden goes out and leads the Bears in receiving yards, as you just suggested he could, you wouldn't have a hard time just starting those rookies over them. Blue, he could flex still, but would be, in some scenarios, potentially hard to even get into our lineup on this team. And if he's not running a ton, if he is more just a receiving back, the scoring profile may not be super high ceiling. Ayuk goes, Dylan Sampson goes. We are 1 pick away. And Trey Benson goes. He makes it all the way back. So the gamble pays off. Smash the Luther
We select
Burden
Luther
button.
Burden. We may find out, 30 seconds from now that he's suffered another injury as we
I
are
don't care.
drafting.
That was awesome. That was the highlight of the night. We risked it because we did have a kind of a toss up. I made that comment to you, who might have the best chance to come back. I think that was the reason you kind of leaned and clicked Blue at the end there. And then I felt bad. I got us off Burden. You're always so price conscious. I always just want to overdraft guys, but the discipline paid off, Shawn. It paid off. We get Burden there.
Love that I can be part of a tandem where I'm the price conscious person.
Once Ayuk and Sampson went in the 3 picks ahead of us, it was that situation where you're like, okay, well, both the guys that probably would have been like fallback options went, and then the target goes the pick ahead of you. And you're like, not only did we get sniped, but we got pre-sniped on our backup options right before that. We avoided that. Trey Benson went, we got Burden. That's why I'm so excited, because we would have had to go really far down at that point to like who we would have decided to take. I don't know who it might have been.
Yeah, one thing to consider is we don't have a clear pick in this 11th round.
We don't. The only guy in the queue at this point is the guy I added, Michael Pittman, who you have not commented on at this point.
I don't feel like he's
You've now
draftable.
added somebody who has an ADP in like 6 rounds, but we have to get. I'm very much in with you on him, but his ADPs, doesn't he go a lot later? It's Brashard Smith.
Later. But the other thing is that there was supposedly a report today that the Chiefs are looking for like a space back, like a third down back. And I'm like, do people stop reporting things that are flagrantly ridiculous? And or could the Chiefs stop doing things like passing on Jonathan Taylor for Clyde Edwards-Helaire and then acting like Isaiah Pacheco is a viable starter? Can we stop
Wait,
with
what do you mean
all
they're
of the
looking
Chiefs
for a
related
third down back?
nonsense?
Don't they have that? They're looking
Well,
for it right
Brashard
now?
Smith has been one of the standout players in camp, and yet
They want to replace him?
yes, I don't know. I have no idea. It makes absolutely no sense. So Ben, you got to rescue me with a possible pick here. We have nothing. I mean, Michael Pittman, like he has zero value if Anthony Richardson wins the starting job.
But he may not. I mean, there's a possibility that Daniel Jones still wins it, is the case. Dallas Goedert as our tight end 2 is still on the board. I mean, I don't know how that does for rescuing you. I guess we take our whatever quarterback you're really into as an upside swing here. Drake May just went. We're into that range. It doesn't seem like the range to take. I mean, we have Pickens. We could take like a Dak Prescott pick here. Caleb with Luther Burden. I don't got anything for you, man. Brashard Smith is the next running back on my list. I just realized. Jerome Ford.
So you're giving me a hard time, and I know that Brashard Smith is the guy that you want. So it was what I was going to end up doing, but we did time out there on Michael Pittman. I mean, that's got to be the pick, right? But
it has to at 11:03. It has to. I mean, he's obviously a pre-wide receiver window guy. He went after Marvin Mims, dude. I mean, I love Marvin Mims, but come on. You know how many more routes Michael Pittman's going to run than Marvin Mims?
You don't love Marvin Mims. But secondly, I mean, he went after Trey Harris, and Trey Harris is a really cool prospect. But we have a situation where the Chargers are not going to throw that much. They have Ladd McConkey. Keandre Lambert-Smith, who was one of my favorite sleepers in the pre-draft and drafted on basically every dynasty team. I mean, you're telling me basically every time I read you or talk to you, you're telling me that Keandre Lambert-Smith is dominating Chargers camp, which is awesome to hear. I mean, I think that dude is going to be good. And then Keenan Allen, I mean, sadly is going to be their wide receiver too. So yeah. I don't feel that great about.
Yeah, I got to move Trey Harris down. You're right.
I don't feel great about the Cooper Kupp pick right ahead of us, given that, I mean, Torrey Horton is good. And if you have a guy who is good, who is having the kind of camp that he's having in an offense where it's going to be JSN and then not much, I don't think Kupp is draftable. When we timed out on the guy that we had to pick. So, and Ben, so I also wanted to grill you about this because you're telling me, certainly I'm seeing plenty of other places that Anthony Richardson is the favorite, that like he's getting all these raves. And then I was reading the practice reports and they're basically like, did you realize that Daniel Jones is terrible? Because Daniel Jones is terrible. And that's keeping Anthony Richardson is like the beat writers, like these guys are both 19 for 43. And I mean, it's not so much a competition as it is a 2-person capitulation. And if they had other options, I mean, it's like, if this were a combined quarterback competition with the Cleveland Browns, like all of the Cleveland Browns guys would be ahead of them,
would actually win
in this competition.
Yeah, no, it's kind of crazy. I mean, this is what I talked about when we went over the projections a little as well, that it was shocking to me just how poor Daniel Jones' numbers are. I mean, not shocking, but they're just bad. And I think when they first got Daniel Jones in the offseason, everyone was like, man, I wish they would have landed on somebody that could beat out Anthony Richardson, because that is a concern. I mean, nobody thinks Daniel Jones is amazing at football or anything, but I mean, he's a problem, and that's where they're at right now. They're like, we don't want to start Anthony Richardson, but the other guy that we brought in for competition isn't very good either. And so I don't really know what to do at this point. I was laughing so hard because you Ran the clock all the way down. I was curious who we were going to get on the timeout. I knew you were pretty aware of it, but you timed out in the most overt act of defiance to the fact that Anthony Richardson might win this job. I'm not actually going to click on Michael Pittman as the deliberate selection at a moment in time where his quarterback could even possibly be Anthony Richardson. If anything, I'll just time out and then we'll be stuck with him. I loved it. It was great.
So you're going to be even more excited when in round 18, I propose just drafting Anthony Richardson.
Yeah, that's where we're at, right? Might as well take him. No, I mean, I think he's a very viable pick. He'll probably go before round 18, John. I bet he goes in the next round or two.
So he's still going pretty late, but
Okay.
he could go anywhere. We did get. Then I've been saying that Ja'Cory Krosky-Merritt is the biggest hype monster of the 2025 offseason. It may actually be this decade. So he goes at 11:10. That is not. It is. I was going to say we could pick him at 11:03 because you have him fairly aggressively ranked. I mean, really not that aggressively ranked. You've got him appropriately ranked.
I got to move him up further. I didn't realize he's going in this range. I've been moving him up, but I had a few guys ahead of him. I saw Najee Harris ahead of him. He's not that aggressively ranked.
The whole thing with Najee is, I guess, in the end, too sad to joke about. But man, he's still available here as he should be. Quinshon Judkins still available as he should be. I was a little bit surprised. The grossest, I mean, even worse, really, than this Colts battle is the idea that the number 2 in Minnesota could be Alexander Mattison. I see you have him ranked at running back 93, which I'm very proud of you to going to 93 running backs.
Yeah, I made sure he got on the list. When you say I have him ranked 93, it's because the list goes to 93. I joked on my rankings release that in last year's rankings release, my comment was that Alexander Mattison was the last player that I ranked. This year's rankings release, Alexander Mattison was the last player that I ranked. I mean, I shouldn't be bragging about that. He had a decent fantasy run last season.
So we get a kicker off the board here at the 12-8. We are one pick away. It's a weird dynamic where Quinshon and Najee are still available. We are swiftly moving into Brashard Smith territory. I was noticing your Roshan ranking. The Bears are pretty tough to understand what they are going to do at the running back position. Johnson is getting some buzz as, I mean, it's been quoted as like the locked in goal line back. I doubt that he's locked in there, but also that he's not playing a lot otherwise, and that Kyle Monangai might be the second stringer.
Mm-hmm.
It feels like the Bears are going to be a team that in redraft, you're just like, no, we don't. Even once you get more information, you probably don't want those backs. You won't be able to start them. We are up here. This is a range where I would feel comfortable taking Brashard Smith. There are some other names. Those QBs that we had talked about last time through are basically all still there. Do you have a different pick we should be looking at?
I just realized I'm going to time out in a draft with our buddy Drico and lost my attention span there for a second. What did you say that were the options? Got 30 seconds.
We could take Brashard Smith or basically Caleb Williams.
Yeah, let's just take Brashard Smith. Well, I mean, yeah, let's take Brashard Smith. We'll just keep pushing quarterback. We want Brashard Smith. Tyler Algier is still there, and that's what made me remember that I had been talking with him about Tyler Algier. It seems like Algier should go by this point. Why is he going so late? I mean, Ramondre Stevenson, Jerome Ford, Rashad White were the last 3 off the board. You mentioned Judkins. He goes here. Judkins is kind of unplayable to me at this point, Shawn. it's not just like a moral stance. I mean, obviously morally it's kind of gross, but also he's like everyone's freaking out about Luther Burden missing practice time. It's an example I keep using. He's not learning the playbook, all this stuff. Judkins is not in camp because he has not signed his contract yet. He's not up to speed in any meaningful way in the offense. This idea that he's going to like serve a suspension, come back, and then play the next week. He's a rookie who is missing training camp. Like they're starting preseason games. That's the whole idea of like boarding a moving train. This guy's going to come in midway through the season at best. I mean, potentially could just not play this year as he deals with his legal stuff and come in next year. But at best, he's coming in mid-season cold on everything as a rookie. It just, I mean, he's not going to play. He's not going to play. He might get some carries like week 14. He starts getting some carries. I don't know, but it just seems shocking to me that he's like some value when he starts to slide. I mean, I don't know what people are thinking in terms of what the upside case is here for how everything goes. He's got legal hurdles to just get to where Luther Burden was in terms of you're missing camp, but you're at least in there at practice and you're watching your teammates and watching the install and all this stuff. He's not with the team because they haven't signed him because of the legal things. And so I don't know. I mean, maybe they're talking to him. Maybe they've sent him. I'm sure he has a playbook. He was at mini camp. He's got to be way behind everything, right?
It does. It seems like the most likely thing is he won't play, but he's also just a really tough roster clogger. And we've been willing to take guys like that in Addison and Brandon Ayuk, but it's a difficult and I think much tougher situation in that you could just be playing with fewer guys all season. That's tough to do in this competitive of a format. So then it does come back here to where we talked about different ways that we can play QB to try to win the whole thing. I mean, Dak Prescott is interesting if we think the Cowboys are going to throw that much.
Yeah.
Caleb Williams is interesting if we think. I mean, it's probably Prescott or Williams. Do you have a preference here?
I have them ranked back to back, and I've been on the record as saying that I kind of just have doing that by ADP. I don't have a strong lean at all. I go either way. This is a tough range for me. I think you just try to get the right price. So you click Dak there. I mean, we have both Blue and Pickens. I think we are playing that thesis that they're going to throw a ton. I think they are going to throw a ton. Dak's always been
a huge discount. Right. Yeah. This was a huge discount. Prescott is a guy who can just, he runs so hot and cold in terms of his different fantasy seasons. If you did get the hot version of him, he might make you competitive. I'm looking here, how if we don't have one of those elite QBs, how we can do this. One of the names that jumped out to me from your rankings, I was really intrigued by the target that you put on JJ McCarthy. He would potentially be someone we could draft in the next round, and we have the Jordan Addison play. So I would be okay with adding both of those guys. The name that you had really pushed down your rankings that made me sad was Jarquez Hunter. I think he's still much more valuable than that. But the other player who we may not get now because we take a QB, it's interesting. You mentioned that the reviews for Chase Brown have been fantastic. I'm sure that based on your ranking that the reviews for Taj Brooks, I mean, when you pull him up right now, the headlines you get are that the Cincinnati Bengals have found the next Emmitt Smith, which, I mean, we talk about Ja'Cory Krosky-Merritt. Should the next Emmitt Smith still be available?
Yeah. There's a lot of enthusiasm about Taj Brooks, which is fun. The thing I've been loving is the consistent talk about the character stuff and how good he is, off the field and learning the playbook and all of these things. There seems to be a lot of positivity around his development right now. And I mean, Zach Moss just seems like he couldn't get healthy, but they did give him a little bit more guaranteed money this offseason. We talked about it at the time. If you read the Bengals blogs back then, and when I went through the projections process, I went through it again. They all said very definitively, they gave him more guaranteed money. It seems like he's a roster lock. And we talked about it at the time. We were like, it doesn't really seem like that. It seems like they gave him a little bit more guaranteed money, kind of as like a nice thing, kind of just for the optionality of it all. They really lowered his per game non-guaranteed salary were he to make the team. And that's the point that made a lot of people say, well, you do this, you give him more signing bonus money, drop the per game stuff when you're going to keep the guy on the team. Why else would you give him the additional money? Well, they lowered it quite a bit. And it was one of those things where Zach Moss accepting it on his end was pretty clearly an admission that, like, it wasn't a bet on himself. It was the opposite. It was like, yeah, probably going to get cut either way. So I'm going to take a little bit of extra money here. And then ultimately there's still, the issue of roster spots and he does go. But the fact that he goes so early when they paid him additional money in the offseason and they don't wait to see and take it up to the last minute, I guess I took that as another very positive thing about Taj Brooks, where they're like, yeah, no, we got this rookie in here. We really like what we're seeing so far. It's hard to see any scenario where because they were always going to keep Pirine, who they brought in. They know well. He's their veteran leader that they wanted to bring in. I think they feel really good about Taj Brooks is sort of where I'm going. Maybe it was just a health thing entirely with Moss, but you asked about McCarthy. McCarthy came out really favorably in my projections. I'm very pro Kevin O'Connell and what he's been able to, it's hard to get out of your head what he was been able to do with even Nick Mullins and Josh Dobbs on like a week of rest after he came over from the Cardinals. Got a decent performance out of him right away. He's been pretty aggressive with the pass rate, even in scenarios like that Dobbs scenario where it's like, you wouldn't fault him for being pretty run heavy, but he understands you got to throw and keep pressure on through the air to open up run lanes in this NFL. I think he's a very big asset as a head coach to fantasy scoring for a quarterback. Part of this ranking here, Shawn, or this target number, it's because I wound up projecting McCarthy aggressively and gave McCarthy some strong efficiency metrics, which builds off of the fact that Sam Darnold got strong efficiency metrics last year and very strong. And I don't think Sam Darnold played very well, basically. I think I think he played well within what he was asked to do and within the system, but I don't think, obviously he got found out late in the year, and I don't think he was necessarily, him developing as much as Kevin O'Connell being that type of coach and understanding what elements to be pushing and focusing on and what things to be giving him even in the headset and all of these things, where it seemed to work really well for them for a long time. They're still concerned there, but the reason I see JJ McCarthy as a target is that, number one, he did come out so aggressively in my projections, and I look at my projection results bar none most heavily at quarterback, because that's a reflection of my projection for the whole offense, is how the quarterback's TDs come out and all of that stuff. All of the receiving numbers feed back into the QB. So when I look at the result, I talk often about how I don't look at the result for the other positions too much. I look at the result for the QB and I go, this is intriguing when JJ McCarthy's ahead of Brock Purdy and some of these guys that go many, many rounds ahead of him in these drafts. Right there behind Bo Nix, basically. He has a little bit of mobility. There's talk in camp that he's been scrambling a little bit. There's talk that he's been missing some throws or he's been unable to read out the downfield stuff. The way I would put it, Shawn, is he has the best top three wide receiving option, like combination in the league, in my opinion, in terms of how they fit together as well. I mean, TJ Hawkinson is a legit, if not top tier, second tier, very good, legit, tight end weapon. Jordan Addison, every time you turn around, is scoring a 60-yard touchdown in camp. Justin Jefferson's probably the best wide receiver in football, period. And if you have those three dudes and you have a very improved offensive line, because they went and attacked the interior of the offensive line because they got hit on that a little bit late last year, and you have Kevin O'Connell's scheme, and you have Aaron Jones, right, that they want to keep healthy to use as a catch-and-run player to boost the passing stat. I mean, the passing efficiency for these guys could be really, really strong, as long as JJ McCarthy doesn't suck. That's what it comes down to. But the ceiling statistically is good, right? So I think he's a target in one QB leagues, particularly where you can replace it as well. Take him with a Dak Prescott. I think JJ McCarthy could be like QB6 this year if he's actually decent.
QB6.
I think he could also be like QB20, Shawn, if he sucks, which he may.
Is he gonna run some?
I think he's gonna run some. There's some camp reports that looks like that's gonna be a part of what we see from him, that he's looked like a natural in that regard. It was part of the prospect stuff that he didn't do a ton, but he was capable of doing it. I mean, I go back to a key 3rd and long where he ran for a first down in the national championship against my Huskies at a game I was at. and it was devastating. It was a backbreaker late. It was a very smart and savvy time to scramble. So I think he's the greatest scrambler of all time.
It did seem like you were indexing very strongly to that play that you had seen. Then I've got some good news for you. Taj came back.
Let's grab
So
him.
depending on how strongly you feel about that, we could go
Yeah.
that route.
No, I love it. I love it. Yeah, Algier went. Najee Harris finally went. Nick Chubb went. I mean, we're at the point where Taj is the last before a tier break for me, marked as a target, and I probably have him ranked too low at this point. And for this type of format, I mean, some of my rankings are, for home leaguers and those things, I have no problem pulling up rookies in our drafts here in these formats. But he winds up as the clear pick in my rankings, even, as is at that point. So that was a strong one. I threw Jatavian Sanders and Harold Fannin into the queue here, Shawn. I don't know where their ADPs are at, but I'd like to get them both. Sanders continues to sound like he's going to be a star.
You're not going that aggressively in redraft, which is frankly a bit surprising. Maybe not Fannin, but a lot of people weren't that high on Jatavian Sanders as a prospect, and so they're gonna not be as intrigued by him in his second year as we are. It's so funny because we had that round 11 pick that we weren't excited about, and we definitely have like 15 guys that we want to pick in these next 3 rounds before we have to take kicker and defense. 4 rounds left for us to make non-kicker D selections. Blake Corum has gone, which is interesting.
If you want to
Manon
take
guy
Jarquez,
went. He was
we can
somebody I
definitely
thought
take
was
him.
interesting later.
Part of
I
my
think that
excitement. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say that McCarthy, Hunter, and then Giddens as well, but then also in the next picks, Keaton Mitchell, which again, we got to think of those next picks a little bit because we can't just take multiple guys in those rounds. I think Keaton Mitchell is almost a must select, and then I agree with you on those tight ends.
Yeah, Keaton Mitchell, I wrote a ton about today, but I haven't published it yet. But I am with you. It sounds like every day they're just like, this guy's incredible. I mean, he's the upside handcuff if something were to happen to Derrick Henry. People keep saying he's number 3. Justice Hill. Yeah, I mean, Justice Hill's not going to run for 20 times a game or whatever if it comes to that. Well, I mean, so a bunch of QBs went. If we wanted McCarthy, this would be the time to take him. But I'm fine just going the one QB with Dak and going. Like, if you want to take Jarquez Hunter, I've moved. I when you said that, I wrote it somewhere recently. I probably moved him down too far. I'm just a little worried about. So you grab McCarthy there. With Hunter. I'm a little worried about. I guess I moved him down because I was not excited about, but at least a little bit intrigued about the potential that he could take over like meaningfully, even though I have said that it's a lot different than when Kyron Williams took over for Cam Akers 2 years ago, because Sean McVay basically hated Cam Akers and was constantly like sending him home, and talks about Kyron Williams like he wants to name his son after him, and he's probably the godfather of his kid and all of these things. Like, he thinks he's the greatest human being ever, which is good. I mean, it's great that Kyron Williams has a very positive personality and influence on the locker room, but that kind of stuff does help. You're a leader in those things. It's going to help a little bit with playing time. And the big part of it, Sean, being that he just signed his extension, got some money.
It is a good contract for him. It's also a contract where if he essentially is beaten out by Hunter at midseason and they're like 1A, 1B over the next 3 years, that contract is still fine.
Oh, I haven't really dug into the contract too much, so that's interesting. Yeah, I guess the other part of it would be if Hunter's not going to be able to get into the mix right away, the stuff that led to Blake Corum going 14-11 here, where you're not certain that he's the clear backup either, but it sounds like you're pretty confident. I mean, Corum wasn't a prospect that you loved last year and had a horrible rookie year. So, and then they drafted another running back on top of that.
The stuff out of Rams camp is weird because certainly people very accurately think that Kyron Williams is going to be the starter. They act like Corum and Hunter have both been good, but they basically act like Hunter has been the best back. And I mean, he was drafted to give the offense things that it doesn't have. And so it does surprise me. It does surprise me that, he would be punished to the extent that it seems like he's being. But I also think that we want to keep in mind on some of these plays that you're probably going to have a shot. I mean, Jarquez Hunter is the guy you can have a shot on in free agency after week 2 or after week 1, right? So you want to have a little bit of humility with it as well. One of the things on Dak Prescott is that we're going to get to see what he does in that first game. If he has a bad game, we definitely want to have another QB. I guess I would be nervous about JJ McCarthy in his first game if that had to be our second QB that we went to, especially because Jordan Addison won't be playing in that game. But there are some other ways that we can work through that as well. But it felt like such a good time and situation to add McCarthy. One of the things that I was looking at a little bit there, sort of as the picks were going off, is that I do like this basically this matchup between between our two QBs in week 15, the first week of the sprint, and then McCarthy is going to have this home game against the Lions, which I mean, we'd like to think that that game is going to have the highest over under of week
Week 16.
17, when it gets down to it. And so, I mean, McCarthy is a little bit more interesting if you're playing him as a little bit of a leverage tournament winner off of some of the higher projected and certainly probably higher rostered by, teams in the top 30 in that last week. But a game where he goes off and Jordan Addison scores multiple touchdowns, that would potentially be your path to winning the $1 million. So thinking about a few things like that and just how the individual team works, there's no problem with having 100% of any of the late guys that you love in redraft as it might be in best ball, but we also don't have to have that with a Jarquez Hunter.
I wanted to ask you
come
about.
back around. He doesn't. He goes at 15-11.
Yeah, he goes. I wanted to ask you about Kyle Monangai. You kind of asked me about Roschon Johnson, but we went a different direction with it. I had a subscriber actually tell me basically today when I had written about Roschon the other day that he's from Chicago and has seen a lot of that favorable Monangai stuff. I had maybe missed some of that. I mean, the prospect profile is not very strong on him. The tested athleticism, not great. The receiving stuff, he never had 100 receiving yards in a season, like yards. Like he had some targets and he had some routes. He just was not efficient at all when he was out in route. Like his yards per run very, very low in his different seasons. He has some decent rushing metrics. I guess my take is that the Bears running back room has to be undervalued in some. And then you look at Ben Johnson's, last time coaching DeAndre Swift, he immediately cut him from 150 carries to 99 in a backfield that he shared with Jamal Williams. Jamal Williams had 260 carries at a 4.1 yards per carry. Swift was at 5.5 and had 99. Now, a lot of that was probably against light boxes, whatever, but he's giving Jamal Williams just grinder carries over and over and over. He had 17 touchdowns that year, but that was more than 100 carries ahead of Jamal Williams' second. It was a career high by more than 100 carries. He never had another season within 100 carries of that. Basically, the next year, he went to the Saints and was done. Never played again, really. I mean, a little bit of work there, but it seemed to me like they didn't really care about how bad Jamal Williams was that year. Maybe it was just a unique thing with Jamal Williams, but all this talk about Roschon Johnson not being good, I guess I'm having a hard time getting that out of my head where, he has all the size and he just gets a lot of carries and he gets all the carries at the goal line, scores double-digit touchdowns. It gets he may just dominate DeAndre Swift in carries is the thought, but maybe that's wrong. Maybe it's Monangai that would do that, or maybe it's just Swift that gets a ton of work.
Yeah, I think that's interesting. I do have a note on that here in a moment. We're a couple picks away, and it's not so much a question about who we should draft here as trying to structure these last 3 picks together. I really have 4 names that I want. And I mean, more than 4 names, but I really want Keaton Mitchell, Jatavian Sanders, Harold Fannin, and Jalen Royals
Mhm.
for the take a peek element. How do we work through those 4 guys? Is there someone that you feel like we can pretty easily just push out?
No, I want all of them too. When you asked me to draft, I was like, I finally understand why you want Jalen Royals in every. I thought tonight would be the night we definitely get Brashard Smith and Jalen Royals before they start rising because the camp reports are just about them every single day. When they're not about Tyquan Thornton.
Right. Right. Taekwon. Yeah. I mean, the Chiefs love the speed because if your guys can run a 4.2, that means they're going to be really good over those first 3 yards. Um,
I mean, maybe I guess we don't need Keaton on a team where we started Bucky, Taylor, Harvey, or maybe we don't need 2 more tight ends on a team where we started Brock. I don't know. I want to get Royals on this team, so it's probably giving up one of Keaton or one of the tight ends. I'm okay passing up one of the tight ends if there's one. I mean, we take Harold Fannin in every draft, but I could pass on Jatavian in this one. So you grab Keaton there.
so when you say that Jatavian has, it sounds like he's going to be a star, which is something that I agree with. But how does that manifest within the context of the offense? I saw some reporting about a week ago that Jalen Coker might even not even make the team, which certainly would be heartbreaking for you and me since we draft him like 70 slots above ADP pretty frequently and think that he is going to be a star. But then in the combined practices, he supposedly was their best receiver, which makes more
Yeah,
sense.
he's
But
obviously going to make the team. Me and our buddy Pat Crane were arguing about this all weekend at the ship chasing meetup in Miami, but we had a long running joke about Coker. He was telling me about Hunter Renfrow, who's injured. How Hunter Renfrow is going to make the team. I mean, the Coker stuff is so weird, but he's just so obviously like I don't buy it. I don't buy the reporting that he's not going to make the team. But no, I think you're right. I think maybe Sanders is the guy that we pass on here. Harold Fannon's. I mean, I actually have Sanders ranked ahead of him, but it's just because Fannin goes so late. You can wait, but Fannon's the guy you got to have. When I was on CBS show yesterday, I got a chance to do a late round sleeper pick. Fannon's the first guy that came to mind at any position and named him, this really deep sleeper or what have you for kind of more casual players. It's not like Jatavian Sanders was the guy popping in my head. There's good reports on Sanders, but Fannin is the really unique profile that seems to be completely flying under the radar. So anyway, I'd rather prioritize him. You grabbed Royals there. Really wanted to get Royal. So the ADP suggests we can get Fannin on the way back.
yeah, the tight ends, there's just there's a strange lack of demand for those guys. And I think that Royals is a wild card where because there are 2 tight ends, and if we didn't get Fannin, we could probably still take Sanders or have that possibility. I mean, obviously, at this point in the draft, the guys could go anywhere. But even though maybe Royals is less likely to stick on our team than those guys would be, I think when we have Bowers up at the top, and then you have that chance. I don't think it's very likely. I don't want to give people the wrong impression on this, but I do think that Royals should have been a round 2 pick. He's been very good in camp. Rashee Rice is going to be out, and you might get a fluky game. I mean, Xavier Worthy scored a bunch of points in a fluky fashion in week 1 last year. You could put that right in the lineup on a team where we selected Jordan Addison and then 2 rookies and Higgins and Burden, and we timed out on Michael Pittman. Then if Jalen Royals has a good game in week 1, he is going to be in that first starting lineup.
That's right. He is a good ad for this team. And it seems very possible. All they're talking about is how smart he is, how heady he is, how much he can pick up, how shocking it is, how much he looks like Rashee Rice. I'm getting caught up a little bit on some camp stuff in these last couple of days that I've been a week in some cases or more behind. And I spent a lot of time reading about the Chiefs today. I did about a third of the league today, different teams, and they were one that I hit on. And it's just all Jalen Royals, it seems, and then Brashard Smith. I mean, it's just all these dudes that you've been saying since the draft. the people that you pay attention to around Kansas City were saying that they had both these guys on their boards significantly higher, and they took them where they did because, and then that's what the reporting is now, is like they don't see Jalen Royals as a day 3 receiver. They think he was somebody that they got an absolute steal on. Sort of the same deal with Brashard Smith. And so getting both those guys on this team, there was a couple weeks there where I thought getting Hollywood Brown on one of those early main events was actually going to pan out. He's injured again. And
it sounds like
now the talk
pretty badly injured.
Yeah, he may not make the team is what it's like starting to sound like. I don't know what his contract's like, but like one of those quotes was like, he's just way behind and everyone else is doing so well, it seems like. So whatever happens there, I guess it would
It's rough for him. I wish he were able to stay healthy. He would have been a really good NFL receiver if he had stayed healthy through his career, but he definitely has not. And sadly, that's continued this year. So I was saying that we would be able to get Sanders later. He went 2 picks after we clicked on Jalen Royals. So now we are in a little more of a hopeful mode about Harold Fannin. But I mean, some of these guys are going to be available in free agency. My understanding is that Terrence Ferguson is hurt right now, which I'm not saying we necessarily pick him if Fannin goes, but he's someone else where a week or two into the season we could make a pickup. I mean, basically, Ben, if we're not just playing Brock Bowers every week, then yeah. I mean, I think the team that I had that won was a Rob Gronkowski team where Rob Gronkowski got hurt. So I want to say that if Brock Bowers gets hurt, this team is still going to dominate. But we hope that that's not what happens.
We're basically just playing the Brock Bowers show, which makes sense. But we still have a shot to get Fannin as well. The next Brock Bowers, of course.
There you go.
Which is, of course, a silly comment coming from.
Given the depth chart situation there and the look ahead, or the whatever, take a peek. I mean, is Keandre Lambert-Smith draftable?
Yeah. I was just gonna bring him up. Actually, he's got to be in the range. I was gonna joke that if we had to, we could go to our guy Jalen Coker, but I was just toying with the ranks in that range a little bit and moved Lambert-Smith over Coker. Actually, as after you're adding to the fear, uncertainty, and doubt here on Coker that he's not even going to make the team. It makes no sense that he would make the team so they could keep Adam Thielen and Hunter Renfrow and all. I mean, when he actually had a very good season last year. It's very bizarre. Xavier Legette was not very good. It just doesn't make any sense. I mean, Coker looks like he's on his way to being the next multi-year contributor as a UDFA, the next Alan Hearns or something like that. Somebody who could actually be usable and fantasy relevant over multiple years. Maybe not. Maybe I'm underselling him by saying the next Alan Hearns, but it's the first UDFA that came to mind that had multiple good seasons, stuck around longer than expected. Anyway, he would be in the discussion as well.
So our preferred defense has gone here. Arizona at the 1803. Oh, Harold Fannin does go, Ben. That is disappointing. So our guy, Trevor Etienne, still a possibility. As I mentioned, KLS. I'm always on board with a good Troy Franklin pick late. I see you don't even have him bolded on your rankings, even though he's like in the hundreds. So thanks for raining on my parade there. Jalen Lane, a fun late pick, but probably doesn't need to be drafted. Although I do kind of feel like he's got a shot to be the wide receiver 1 for Washington. Yeah, we're 3 picks away.
Maybe just go defense kicker at this turn, and then we'll figure out the 20th rounder on the way back.
Is that because you are
indecisive?
Okay. Do you have concerns about ETN specifically within the context of this build?
No.
Okay.
No, I'm happy to take ETN. We haven't gotten him yet. A lot of names that I like, and there are not enough slots for all of them to go, basically. But we might as well take the one that we want, because I also don't have a reason that we would take a defense or who that defense would be or who that kicker would be. So,
Well, I was going to suggest maybe we take Jake Elliott, as we're prone to do for tactical reasons.
I mean, 10 defenses are already off the board. It's not like we're getting ourselves any great advantage by taking a D at this point. Are all the take a peek defenses gone? KC, who else? Eagles gone?
You can take the Chargers or the Cowboys.
Against KC
The
and
Chiefs. The Chiefs. And yeah.
We can take Elliott.
Okay, so that gives us a little more time to decide on either a defense or now. Do you think that I mean, obviously there are scenarios. Do you think it's worth rostering a defense against? It sounds like the Cowboys defense is going to be terrible, which was part of my thesis with the Dak Prescott pick. But I guess it seems more likely to me that the Eagles could give up defensive points maybe than the Kansas City Chiefs.
I guess I don't see why that would be, because they run the ball so much. We want pass attempts against, don't we? You just think Patrick Mahomes is going to throw touchdowns every time. Spoken like a true Chiefs fan.
I think they will be able to avoid negative plays. Whereas I even after they eviscerated my guys in the Super Bowl, I'm nervous about the way that Jalen Hurts played for most of last season.
Okay.
I guess I don't see either of these defensive plays as being, I mean, it's a famous last words kind of thing. I don't have them as key picks.
Then let's just take the whatever non-defense we want to take and then figure out defense on the way back. Although I don't have an answer for that question either. Time to Google week 1 schedule. I haven't drafted a defense since I think our last main, Shawn.
That's right.
Who were we? I had some teams that I was all excited about last time. Was it the Cardinals?
It was. The Cardinals have been the team that we've leaned on to this point.
At the Saints in week 1, and then I think they get some other fun ones too right after that. Yeah, at home against Carolina week 2. We should just take the Cardinals.
Well, they did go. That was my
I'm just kidding.
I gotcha.
Yeah.
ETN or Lambert Smith here?
Man, 2 good picks. What do we need more of? Probably the Lambert Smith take a peek along with the Royals. Take the same argument you made with Royals, that if he scores really well, we'll put him in the lineup. I mean, what if Lambert Smith has 2 touchdowns in the opener? Goes right into the lineup, doesn't he?
It seems like he's so blocked by what they have done at this point, but maybe that's
let's go ETN then. Let's take ETN. I really like ETN. I basically make fun of Rico Dowdle every chance I get. So
we'll click on ETN here. It seems like we're going to get Lambert Smith for some of these early picks before all is said and done.
The Lambert Smith pick was, purely sorry, I'm looking at the defenses now, but just purely the take a peek element. And I mean, the potential that he's pretty exciting, but there are just so many players there. Like you said, it's not great. You talked earlier about it not being great for Trey Harris. So I thought maybe you were a little bit higher on Lambert Smith, but ultimately it's going to be a little rotational. And now they have Keenan Allen there, and there's just not a ton of routes to go around. They got 3 good tight ends. And Rondé Gadsden's getting all these positive reports. They got Conklin and Will Dissly. I mean, they have. That's what we talked about when we went through some of the projection stuff, was that I feel really good about the Chargers team building. They have a lot of redundancy, a lot of depth. They did a good job this offseason of building out their areas that were weak. Obviously, haven't even mentioned Quentin Johnston. And I mean, that's the way to do it in this industry. You know, this is a tough sport to stay healthy at, and to have all the guys that you want go the way that you want them to go. You have added the Patriots to the queue. I was looking at them. They're home against the Raiders. I just threw the Bengals in there. Bengals in week 1 are at Cleveland. I feel like Cincinnati throws enough that they'll get teams going. I feel like Joe Flacco, the report the other day was that he's the strong favorite to start. And Joe Flacco, I mean, is he the perfect quarterback to have your fantasy defense against? Because he'll throw the ball around a lot. And he doesn't care who he's throwing it to. He'll throw it to the other team.
He probably feels like he's got a ton of rope as his damn the torpedoes approach contrasts with Jameis Winston's, where Winston, really, you get the impression that like he just has this tiny preference for actually throwing an interception, whereas Joe Flacco would be a little bit disappointed if he threw one. I mean, not very disappointed, but just like a tiny bit.
Mildly disappointed.
So
I love that. Jameis Winston has a preference for throwing the interception is a classic Siegelism right there. Washington Commanders, is their D supposed to be any good? They're at home against Russell Wilson in week 1. He'll take a lot of sacks for you.
Well, that's a nice play. Oh yeah, the Jets are going to be at home against their former QB, who is just going to spend all of week 1 trying to figure out how to get the plays off.
Yeah, that's going to be the issue. Is the Steelers are going to run 38 plays in week 1, and you can't get enough interceptions off 38 plays.
No, the game where Aaron Rodgers was benched toward the end of last season. What was this game here? Yeah. Where he scored 1.6 against the Bills, and then in that game he was 12 for 18, but a couple of picks. It's one of the worst games I've ever seen. It really felt a lot worse than that, trying to think back.
12 for 18.
Yeah.
You got 18 passes off. That's amazing.
It wasn't peak Aaron Rodgers, and there have been a lot of people skeptical about his fit with DK Metcalf, and then the reports are that it has not been good so far in camp, which I mean, it's still actually kind of early when you consider, you know,
I wonder who Rodgers thinks.
But
I wonder who Rodgers thinks is to blame for that. He's just going to end up mad at everybody this year, is he not?
Seems like he will. So we still have that take a peek with. I mean, we can always just play the take a peek with the Cowboys and then come back with one of these 3 defenses that are going to still be there. I mean, it feels like there's a strong possibility that we'll forget to sub the defense out, but
other than that, it's fine. The problem is, can we cut the defense? Can we cut the Cowboys?
My understanding is that we should be able to, because you can cut the Thursday players who you didn't start.
Okay.
And so
cool. Let's do it.
It should be.
We might as well just get the free. There's only going to be 2 more picks behind us. We might as well get the free, free take a peek. Maybe there's a pick 6 in there. I saw the D at the beginning of the defense. Detroit just went, not Dallas. We are one pick away. We'll see if they make it one more pick to us. They did. Let's go ahead and grab them. We'll see how that works. The good news is their best defender, Michael Parsons, may just quit football because their general manager / owner refuses to act in good faith. So anytime you can make your terrible defense worse by making the best player on that side of the ball hate your entire organization, I mean, you got to do it, right?
That's a weird one. He's very, very good, and that defense was a force. They were a threat when he was there. But yeah, you probably have to take that one a little bit more seriously than George Kittle threatening retirement over the banning of the smelling salts. But if he does quit, we dodged that bullet in 2 different rounds today. Ben started with Brock Bowers there in round 1, our running back group. Bucky Irving, Jonathan Taylor, RJ Harvey, Jaden Blue, Brashard Smith, Taj Brooks, Keaton Mitchell, and Trevor Etienne. Lots of depth, lots of contingent upside, a lot of talent. That's pretty exciting. The wide receiver group, a little bit unique for us, but also I think with a lot of upside and contingent, well, a lot of depth and contingent upside, I should say. But George Pickens, we did lean into this cowboy shootout thesis for this draft. George Pickens, Chris Olave, Jordan Addison, Jaden Higgins, Luther Burden, the auto pick of Michael Pittman and Jalen Royals, and then at QB, Dak Prescott, JJ McCarthy. In terms of thinking through where we were when we made the picks, and then in hindsight, with some additional information, knowing where guys went, anything that you would have done differently, or things that you'd like to change about this squad?
It's really tough in some of the ADP pockets. I think Bucky, Jonathan Taylor puts you in a little bit of a weird spot. We don't necessarily love our wide receiver room, but I don't know who we would have done differently. I mean, we've talked a little bit about how maybe Tedoroya McMillan or Xavier Worthy would be the guys that we would actually prefer if we were really going to take a receiver as high as those ranges, because a lot of the receivers that go in the 3rd round, not necessarily the dudes you'd want. And I'd feel better about our receiver room if they had those guys at the top. But I don't dislike and do actually like the start, the Bowers and Bucky and Taylor, and those are guys that we can get exposure to at a later cost, different drafts, those types of things. I don't think there's anything I would have done differently at 2-3. And then at 4-5, very similar deal. I really like the Pickens pick, actually. I love the way that worked out. Taking Harvey at 503 was necessary. There's nobody who goes. I mean, the players after Harvey, where we take our 3rd running back in 5 rounds, the next 10 or so picks, James Conner, Terry McLaurin, Laporta, we already had Bowers, Joe Burrow, Devonta Smith. I mean, you mentioned that would have maybe have been the receiver you would take. I don't think that's crazy. Cortland Sutton, Chuba Hubbard, DJ Moore, DeAndre Swift. That's the rest of the round. And then Jalen Waddle goes 601. I mean, that's a guy that, after there's been some reports that he may be the top guy in Miami. I wasn't super in on him, but somebody that, I wrote the piece that I thought Miami was one of the most important offenses, or the most important offense to get right this year. They're starting to talk about Waddle as maybe being the number 1, and Tyreek's now banged up again. And if we get back to a, rookie season, Jalen Waddle caught 100+ balls. We get back to that type of a Jalen Waddle profile. Certainly, I don't want to be underexposed to that when my take was that the offense has the potential to be very exciting for the guys who win. So he would be one that I'd maybe look at and say, well, if I was going to take somebody different at 503, it would be somebody who went literally 10 picks later. Zay Flowers, middle of the next round, Jerry Jeudy, Ibuka on the way back. A lot of the picks that made sense went like 15 picks after us on the way back to us. So then we take Olave and we pull up Addison that time. And I really like that we pulled up Addison. We had to start addressing wide receiver, and I think we did a good job with that. We get Higgins. We push Burden around. We do get Burden to come back. I like the Pittman pick, auto pick as it was, because you couldn't bring yourself to select an Anthony Richardson wide receiver. Jaden Blue then really makes sense when you also get Burden. I mean, I'm really glad we got both Brashard Smith and Jalen Royals. I don't particularly mind that we didn't get a second tight end here. I mean, maybe with like knowing what I know now, I would have been okay with risking Royals coming back and going tight end first. It was a minor surprise when I saw Royals name flash up and you explained that you're thinking because there was the 2 tight ends, we might get one of them to come back. But not, I mean, I wanted to get Royals in this build and I'm excited. And I agree with you that with the receivers we got and with Addison on suspension, if Royals with the take a peek element has a good week 1, we're plugging him right into the lineup. I like that we did Dak and McCarthy. Wasn't thinking about the take a peek at quarterback, but that's great. I mean, we get both of those guys. If Dak has a really bad game, if they get blown out by the Eagles, we start JJ McCarthy week 1. If he has, a strong showing, if that turns into a bit of a shootout, we get to make that decision. Quarterback, one of the positions we don't talk about take a peeks about a lot, but probably an underrated, pretty favorable thing about the take a peek element where, I mean, quarterback scoring can be so variable based on game situations and, a number of factors that getting the opportunity to see one of your 2 quarterbacks in action and then decide whether you want to use a score. I mean, that's a pretty big advantage. So when you were talking through the Dallas stuff and the take a peek element, which we also have with Jaden Blue, we also have with George Pickens. We have with both the other Chiefs. There's, you want to build those things in on FFPC a little bit so you have exposure to those things because it is a unique quirk to playing on this site. But yeah, no, I mean, I don't think there's anything else that I would have, or anything at all that I would have done differently. The other picks were mostly all rookie running backs. I mean, Keaton Mitchell, obviously not a rookie, but Brashard Smith, Taj Brooks, Trevor Etienne, Blue, and Harvey earlier. We get 5 rookie running backs. That's a requirement. Shawn, if we get any less than like 3 in a draft, I feel like we failed. This is a rookie running back class that you want heavy exposure to. We got exposure to the rookie receivers as well. Hey, is there something that you see as I'm kind of rambling and going through all the different pockets and all the different ranges? Is there something you see that you're like, I wish we would have done that differently? Because there's not for me. And the stuff that we pulled up is the stuff that I feel the best about. I don't care about tracking ADP when we take Brashard Smith at 12-10 or any of those types of things at this point. Now, I also feel great that we got Jaden Blue and Luther Burden because we played ADP a little bit, but I do think it's one of those years where going and getting your guys is not that big of a problem.
I don't see anything. I mean, you always wish that the draft would fall even better. If Jameson Williams makes it back to us at 503, which he probably should do, then the balance between receiver and running back I think is better. And if that is the case, then I would make probably an appeal to just elevating a couple guys even more. If we had been able to get Jameson Williams at the 503, then I would have been pretty tempted to try and make Blue and Samson the picks at 8 and 9, even though you're going to wring a lot of the potential value out of them by drafting them so high. But I don't think that we're that far away from a scoring environment. Some of the things we talked about Blue at length. Dylan Sampson, very good. They have nothing else there. I mean, Jerome Ford had good peripherals last season, but
Yeah.
they refused to play him. It was a situation that was similar to Javonte Williams, right? But Williams, it was very obvious what was happening was that you don't want to give him the ball. He's going to be on the field, but you don't give him the ball. Jerome Ford was good, but had that same thing happen to him. Well, I mean, Dylan Sampson is again a different kind of guy, and so you put that in there. Maybe Sampson has the ability to be a more consistent or predictable scorer than Jaden Higgins. And if you have that, one of the things I want to make sure that we're doing with these teams is that if we move away from zero RB, which obviously, we have 3 running backs in the first 5 rounds, that we're not moving away from this idea of making sure that we take advantage of the contingent upside of running back plays. And you mentioned how we got the rookie running backs, and that's something we want to check off the list. We do what I just said there with Brashard Smith and Taj Brooks and Keaton Mitchell and Trevor Etienne. And you want to put yourself in a position where maybe it's likely that you're playing 4 running backs in the second half of the season, and all of them have very high weekly projections, right? the whole goal here is you're going to crush the flex. You're going to have the best starting lineup. It's one of the reasons that we drafted Brock Bowers at 103. We want to have the best starting lineup. So I love how this team worked out. I think it was the perfect time to do some plays that maybe one or the other of us isn't comfortable with, but the other one really likes. Um, I was telling you that back a month ago or so when I did some big gorilla drafts for the early Rampage, that I had taken Chris Olave in a similar situation to this, and I thought it worked out perfectly. And your enthusiasm about him was one of the reasons why I wanted to go ahead and make that pick, even if my rankings didn't have it as such a slam dunk. I love that we were able to get one of your guys here in a situation where it just was the perfect fit. There was nobody else, right? And so to have a guy that one of us really likes, I think is great. And so that part is fun
Well, I
because
mean, to be
you don't
fair,
want to be forced into that kind of pick at a spot where like I really want to get somebody else, but we haven't drafted Olave and we
yeah,
need to get exposure to both people's guys. I mean, this is perfect, right? And the Jordan Addison thing, I'm always or I'm increasingly reluctant. I want to make sure that the teams start pretty well. It's kind of a sprint right from the get-go in FFPC leagues, and you want to make sure you're not like a week late in accumulating the right total number of points. But man, Jordan Addison's ceiling is so high that having to wait 3 weeks is
that's
nothing when you
yeah,
think in terms of what this lineup needed in terms of wide receiver punch. I think the pieces just fit together very nicely based on what we were confronted with at every point along the way.
yeah, agreed. Um, I love those notes about the ways that it came together. Like the earlier Jonathan Taylor pick, I'm always a little uneasy about that offensive environment, but I'm really glad that we got him on this team as well. Somebody that I know you're very high on from a talent perspective and tend to see a little bit more ceiling potential for him. As you're talking to Olave, I was like, I mean, you're calling him my guy from the perspective that I'm certainly a little bit more in on him than you, but that's also from the perspective that we're in agreement on a lot of the most exciting plays. The guy that has Spencer Rattler as his QB that I think is probably a pretty good play in the 6th round is not the guy that I want like associated as my guy necessarily. I just think he's a good pick there. I mean, I do. I will
I do
definitely
like
wear
him
that
though
part of
as the
it.
guy like once Jamison Williams is off the board, if it were just you by yourself with no ADP, you'd be like, Chris Olave. I mean, he's the next guy. I'm not going to take
Mm,
like Terry McLaurin and Devontae Smith and Cortland Sutton over here. Like, it's Chris Olave, right?
probably not any of those guys. I think I would take Waddle at this point and Hunter and Zay. But yeah, we're getting to Olave pretty quick. Yeah, I'm not gonna lie.
So I wanted to ask you quickly about Jonathan Taylor. One of the reasons that I like him, especially at this price, which I said at the time I thought was kind of absurd and do continue to think, although the other picks that I'm less excited about in that range, I can understand. But with Jonathan Taylor, unlike the Michael Pittman pick, he seems like a guy who fits both paths. You look at just how terrible their offense was last season and just so many different problems all along the way. And yet he still ends up in a situation where he has the third most EP per game at running back. Now, he's in a group with a bunch of other guys, and weirdly, they're all sort of down from Alvin Kamara. What we didn't see from him last year was efficiency. And yet, I think that the efficiency is coming in any type of a healthy season. But one of the reasons that I like Taylor so much is not just that he has that really high floor from a workload perspective, even in a bad season, but I'm thinking about the ways in which running backs work in 2025. We essentially have a star with a good workload who catches some passes, which should be what happens with Daniel Jones, or you have a guy who plays off of a hybrid QB. And because of the way that dynamic works, he ends up being, wildly efficient on a per play
Mhm.
basis, especially if he's as talented as Jonathan Taylor. So even though it seems like Anthony Richardson would hurt the offensive outlook for anybody else and is going to neutralize his receptions, he could create this type of dynamic. If I mean, The thing that's just so hard is that Anthony Richardson could be terrible again and still beat out Daniel Jones. But you want to think about it from the perspective of what if Anthony Richardson's actually okay? And then if he is okay, what does that mean for Jonathan Taylor? It probably still wouldn't mean the same thing that Lamar Jackson means for Derrick Henry or that Jalen Hurts means for Saquon Barkley, but it probably is still pretty good, right? To where you could get one of these seasons where Jonathan Taylor has another year like 2021 and breaks off a bunch of long runs, in part because the defense has to account for Anthony Richardson on so many of those plays.
Yeah, I agree with all of that. I guess my thought would be that that was sort of the thesis last year as well, and didn't necessarily play out that way. Some of that was just the offensive environment and Anthony Richardson's struggles and all of these things. His peripherals declined quite a bit last year. The evasion rate, the missed tackles for stuff was pretty poor. The yards after contact per attempt, a career low and meaningfully so. He did hit on a little bit of a better rate of longer runs than he had since his second season, the 2021 year where he had the really big year. And that was a big part of why the yards per carry actually came back up a little to 4.7. I mean, he's always been at least in the 4.4, 4.5 range. The great season, he's up at 5.5-ish. I do think he has the potential to be a 5+ yards per carry guy. It comes down to the long runs, and that's what he can do. And he saw that rebound a little last year. It's concerning to me that the peripherals were a little bit weaker last year, and a version of this offense that is not too dissimilar from what we're going to be looking at this year. So sort of everything you just said was what I was hoping for last year, with Joe Flacco being the Daniel Jones. But when Flacco's in there, he's going to catch passes. When Richardson's in there, he's going to be efficient as a runner. He hit really big late, and it could happen in a bigger way. You can totally see that, right? And I think to some degree, I think my feeling on him is that he just wasn't great throughout the key part of the season. That primacy effect that we get, what did you do for me at the beginning of the year, happens a lot, right? These guys that end up doing great late. I think this is why I'm can't get over Jahmyr Gibbs, and I think a lot of people maybe are having a similar thing with Gibbs. I don't know if y'all were watching week 18 as closely as I was, but the division was on the line and this guy was unstoppable. And then I don't know if y'all were watching the playoff game as closely, but Washington was tearing it up and Jahmyr Gibbs was the whole offense coming back. And if you don't think that changes a little bit the way that they view him going into 2025 relative to the splits during the fantasy season last year through week 17, I don't know what to tell you, but sometimes, that late season stuff doesn't stick with us as carefully. And probably that was a case for me with Taylor a little bit last year, where if the sequencing was a little different, I think I maybe would have had a little bit more comfortability with him. But going through the projection process, seeing some of the peripherals not being quite as strong, and going through most of the year last year and seeing just the production not really being there, again, it discounts the fact that I just pulled up the game log that he finished with his 3 best rushing yardage totals in the final 3 games, 6 rushing touchdowns over that span, a minimum of 24 points. I believe that's 24, non-PPR, 25 full PPR, because he had 1 catch in that game. I mean, he was such a good rusher that he was scoring 24 plus in each of the final 3 games in non-PPR.
Yeah, he finished very, very hot. I think the range of scoring outcomes for him is very favorable at that price. But I mean, Hampton ends up going 5 picks later, and he was the other person we were looking at. If Lamar Jackson had been there, would that have been a Lamar Jackson pick for you?
Instead of Taylor, or if Taylor had gone?
Instead of Taylor.
No, I really liked getting the price on Taylor. I brought up Hampton because you had him in the queue ahead of ADP, and in my mind, as we were going even in the round 2 area, I was thinking, maybe Shawn's really into Hampton, or maybe he's really come around on him. Maybe there's something really exciting that he's found. I've drafted with you a lot over the years, and I've definitely gotten to rooms with you where you're like, there's this rookie that I need to have a round ahead of ADP tonight. So I was very prepared for you to be like, Amarian Hampton's the dude that I'm just like certain is going to break fantasy this year, and to want to lean into that. So when we got on the clock at 3:03, I was like, hey, if you want to get Hampton, we can, because we can't take them both. But at that point in time, with Taylor's ADP sort of being where it was, getting the opportunity to get him at 3:03, even after we had gotten Bucky, I was like, man, I mean, the back of my head, I didn't want to like influence you too much. I was kind of leaving it open to you, but in the back of my head, I was like, Taylor's the pick. And I don't think we always talk about take the QB when it's flat. I don't think I would have wanted to take Lamar there. We'll get our exposure to the elite QBs, but when you get an opportunity to take Jonathan Taylor at 3:03, I think it's not flat. You do take that pick there. I'm not so out on the profile. I've been taking him, Shawn. I went and got in some underdog drafts and things while I was down in Miami, and I've been taking some Jonathan Taylor.
There you go. There you go. Long runs. We're in for those. I think the offense is going to be more functional regardless, but then I had promised myself no more Colts receivers. We do take 1 in 11. Michael Pittman is pretty good to be available at that price. This has been a lot of fun. Brock Bowers, we got our Brock Bowers team, have that going. He is the 101 for us. He's not the 101. He's our top ranked player. He's my top ranked player. Ben's rankings, which you can get split out on a cool new tool. I love the stealing signals graphic up there in the corner. Those are available. He had a rankings update to help you work through some of the camp news and also how he's seeing some of these. Love to see Ben's rankings out there. I'll probably have a update after the preseason games. We are only, well, as you listen to this, probably hours away from some preseason action. We'll have a lot more content for you on Stealing Bananas. Ben was mentioning the fire hose of content that's going on over there at Stealing Signals. Make sure you're getting all of that. BenGretch.substack.com. I finally started getting some of those articles out on RotoViz. Coupon code ARGRADIO 2025 at checkout for 10% off. This is the best time of year, Ben. We'll be back soon. Love all you guys. See you then.